Guess who just found out they don't have the measles vaccine? I was adopted as an infant by anti-vaxxers, which should be illegal, but that's its own thing. One thing they don't tell you about being raised by anti-vaxxers is that you don't have a moment when you turn 18 where your doctor comes up to you and says, hey, now that you don't have conspiracy theorists making your medical decisions, why don't you go get that measles shot? This is the letter my adopters sent to the adoption agency about why they weren't going to vaccinate me, and they also enclosed a book by Dr. Mendelsohn, which we're going to get to. One thing I find fascinating about this letter is that there's not a mention of the word autism anywhere on this piece of paper, because believe it or not, the vaccines causing autism fears didn't start until years after I was born. Anti-vaxxers have historically operated on extremely flimsy pretenses, and I want to talk about those pretenses because they're ultimately the reason why I don't have my measles shot today. We're going to talk about the fears of vaccines causing sudden infant death syndrome, acute arthritis in adult women, something I definitely need to be worried about, and then chronic fatigue syndrome. And we're going to be talking about the two prominent anti-vaxxers mentioned here, Dr. Robert Mendelsohn and Vera Scheibner, PhD, whose name is spelled wrong and who I do not believe is a PhD, although I could be wrong, but if you Google her, a simple Google search will not reveal that she's a PhD. Mendelsohn, to his credit, actually worked in the medical field. He was a pediatrician, and that's really the extent of the praise I will give him, because he portrayed doctors as powerful priests of a primitive religion with dishonesty as a central ethic. That's right, he wasn't just an anti-vaccination guy, he really hated doctors and hospitals, and if you don't believe me, I'm going to show you very definitive proof here. Before we get to Mendelsohn's own words, I think it's important to read a quote from one of his colleagues. Nutritionist Kurt Butler described Mendelsohn as a whiny-voiced crackpot who made himself rich and famous by leading the bash doctors movement now in vogue. Mendelsohn, now deceased, made a career out of telling Americans that their doctors are out to rob and kill them. If you think Robert Mendelsohn was only opposed to vaccines, you're kidding yourself. Mendelsohn considered himself a medical heretic. He opposed water fluoridation, immunization, coronary bypass surgery, licensing of nutritionists, and even screening examinations to detect breast cancer. Mendelsohn said that around 90% of surgery is a waste of time, energy, money, and life, and that most hospitals are so loosely run that murder is even a clear and present danger. As is the case with all anti-vaxxers, my adopters were complete hypocrites. They were disciples of Mendelsohn when it came time to opposing my childhood vaccinations, but when they needed surgeries or life-saving cancer treatment, I didn't hear anyone talking about Mendelsohn's ramblings. For some reason, we also need to talk about Vera Scheibner, retired geologist? Scheibner's work has commonly been referenced by anti-vaccination chiropractors. I'll let you guess what my adoptive father did for a living. This geologist speculated that vaccination is the single biggest cause of SIDS, when actually a 2007 meta-analysis found that vaccines actually have the risk of SIDS. You can read more about this geologist's flimsy claims online if you want, but my question again is why are we trusting a geologist to be the anti-vaxxing voice of authority here? I just don't get you anti-vaxxers. Doctors are gonna kill you, so let's go listen to a geologist. Life is too short to be this obsessive over something as trivial as vaccines. This is the part where the anti-vaxxers comment and say, well, you're alive, to which I respond and say, so are you, all of you anti-vaxxers who got your childhood vaccinations.